Hey everyone, welcome. Today, I'm talking with Martin Harris, and before that, let me just welcome you to the ninth episode of season 11 of Productized Podcast. And this season, we are talking about the future of our cities, the cities we live, with this question: what if cities cared more about their digital products and services and actually treated their citizens like real customers they want to retain? This is the podcast where innovators, geeks, creators, entrepreneurs, headmasters of schools come to discuss impactful ideas. Our mission is to inspire people to impactful action. My name is André Marquis. I'm your host. Hi, Martin. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you very much, and thank you very much for inviting me to join you. I'm very honored.
We're very delighted. So let me just tell you guys a little bit about Martin. So Martin Harris is the principal of the Lisboan School, opening in 2023. So it's the most recent international school project in Lisbon. It's probably also the most recent school opening, at least this size, because it's very, very big project. And it's an all-through school with places from the early years to year 13 of the British curriculum, which kind of translates to year 12 here in the Portuguese curriculum. Martin has over 20 years of experience in being a headmaster in schools across different latitudes. And last year, Martin moved here to Lisbon to establish this school project on his terms, with his vision as well, with a new educational model that we'll be covering in the podcast. And Martin is also the governor at St. Mary's Colne School, which is in the UK in Wiltshire. Martin, how is the year going? Are we fully recovered from the COVID crisis that hit schools so hard the past 2 years?
It's been such a tough time for everybody, but schools in particular, because they tend to function on interaction between people. Remote learning was great up to a point, but nothing can take away the social side. And trying to be positive about the pandemic, I think education learned more about itself and about how it functions best over the last 18 months, 2 years, and what works and what doesn't.
How did you navigate this waters? I guess like everybody else, the first 3 weeks were a little bit hectic, but then you adjusted to the so-called new normal and some strategies that you adopted in the schools that you are.
Yeah, I don't know whether I'm typical. We decided that we would offer families a lot of freedom early on in the online learning, and actually, what that missed was the structure. Children, particularly younger children, need structure in their learning. They function best when they know what they've got to do at what time. And in offering freedom, we were trying to accommodate mum and dad working at home, older sister, younger brother, etc., all fighting for Wi-Fi space. One of the things that impressed me most was the dynamic way that we based ourselves on Microsoft Learning, and how dynamic and quick they were to adjust to help us in education.
So you are a Microsoft partner.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, I won't get stuck into the whys and wherefores, but in 2018, we did a very, very detailed study on comparing the different educational backgrounds and platforms. And Microsoft was at that time really coming up very, very quickly. I employed a head of digital to help me with the strategies in 2018. And he led this. And in 2019, and I can remember the meeting very clearly, he sat like you and I across a table, and he told me about this thing called Teams. And I think I was probably distracted. I was probably thinking of the meeting I got afterwards, and maybe a tough meeting with a parent coming up. And I just sort of nodded and pretended I understood exactly what he was talking about, and just said yes. And of course, in a way, luckily, and a complete fluke, it turned out to be the best decision we ever made, because of course then the whole online learning, once the pandemic started, was based around Teams. So that decision was great. There are others. just to try and be fair, but we have used that, and it's really helped. It helped take the school forward. And I think one of the things that I would just say is, in putting structure for the children, it also helped families much more than giving them freedom. And listen, I know that when we asked children to be present at 8 o'clock in the morning, they were wearing tie and jacket and looking very smart. Underneath, most of them probably still had pajamas on or shorts, or we're not looking quite so smart. But it was a great forum.
Were you asking kids to actually wear the dress code of the school in Zoom, or in this case Teams?
In Teams, yeah, we did.
We did. That's really interesting, because we had all this discussion of the pajamas Teams party when people were, even adults, right? Some were not so formal, But why was that?
Well, we being my senior team, spent a lot of time talking about it, and we recognized that, again, younger children in particular, but I think it's true of all children, needed to put a work head on.
Right.
So you have your home head and you have your school head, and just the act of putting your uniform on helped them get into the school way of thinking.
Even if they're fighting for Wi-Fi at home, right? It gives them this psychological space.
Yeah.
And that's very curious. So how did you develop this interest in education? Because you have a bachelor in science and geography. Did you start working in this field just after your bachelor, or how did you get drawn by the magic of education?
Look, I probably should be answering here that I've always wanted to be a teacher, but I'm afraid it wasn't the case.
That was not the case. Okay, so that would be the case.
I was desperate to be a pilot.
An Air Force pilot?
An Air Force pilot.
Oh,
I was going to be Tom Cruise.
All right, the movie is coming up.
Yeah. Sadly,
I know that the British squad has watched it in a pre-screening with Tom Cruise last year on the World Cup.
Okay,
but they only then. So for the rest of us mortals, the movie is still up to.
I think it's couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think so.
Couple of weeks. Can't wait. Anyway, I was devastated to learn when I was 17, 18 that I was too tall for an RAF fighter pilot. It's not like a car where you can move the seat back. So, and they've told me there were 52, I think it was, other jobs that I could do in the RAF, but I just wanted to fly.
So you gave up on your...
I gave up on my dream and went to university.
That was mid-90s? So
you're very sweet. That's very kind of you to say. It was actually the late 80s.
All right. So at the end of the Cold War, maybe we're not needing as many pilots as before. All right. So you decided RAF is not for me, and
went to university. I didn't give it much thought, and this is a lesson for every child: is to just give a little bit of thought about what you want to study at university. I enjoyed my geography degree; there was nothing wrong with it, and it's a very good all-round degree. It doesn't open doors. I think that's a good way to say. I ended up then working for a bank in the city of London, but you quickly realise that you're either a desk person or not a desk person, and I'm not a desk person. And I then went to work in a sports centre in the management side of things after a year in the city, and I didn't enjoy that either. And a friend of mine who'd left university at the same time as me was a real entrepreneur, and he hired out schools during the school holidays and ran sports clubs, and he was desperate, actually, if I'm honest. He needed someone to help him coach, and I remember it now, cricket.
Okay.
And I happened to like cricket and said, of course, I'll come and help you. And I was amazed to find that children listened to me. It was a real epiphany.
It was a gift
moment. Well, that's really overstating it. But children listened to me, and I went to work in a school for a term near my parents' house. Actually, it meant going back home, and I enjoyed it. And the headmaster there, who was a lovely man, took me under his wing one day and just said, "You need to go and get trained. Go back to university, get your teaching qualifications, and then come back and see me in a year's time."
And that's what you did.
And that's what I did.
So you started in that same school?
Yes.
All right, and you are from the United Kingdom, obviously, and you have been working as a headmaster there since because it takes the time. You just don't get to be a headmaster straight away, right? So what's the line of progress between starting working in a school with the kids and then moving towards the position?
After a couple of years, I went to work in a boarding school. I changed jobs. I went to work in a boarding school.
So a boarding school, for people that don't know what it is, it's a special kind of school concept that you have in the UK, which
yes, if you said it cold, it sounds a very odd concept. Why would you send your children away? In this particular case, from the age of 8 upwards. And that sounds almost cruel, but it was for parents who lived overseas.
Right.
So this is in the 90s, in the mid 90s. There weren't such a good selection of international schools overseas at that stage. So lots of children
would actually stay in the UK and rather stay in a boarding school.
That's right. And there were less schools in London at that stage, so quite a few would come. This was in Sussex, so not far from London. And then there were just some parents who had gone to boarding schools themselves and felt that was the best way forward. And funnily enough, since I was working there, I think that model has changed in the UK. This was 2 to 3 weeks before you would see your parents. Which sounds cruel, but what it did was it gave a real sense of community, which I recognized then was a great strength in a school. And the second thing was, it wasn't just about teaching geography or maths or English. It was also the sport, the music, the drama, and all the little bits in between, the friendships, having great friends, having opportunities. And
it's a 24-hour experience.
It was a 24-hour experience. And I think a lot of my friends couldn't quite understand why on earth I would want to work in a school where I had breakfast with the children. And then, some days a week when I was on duty, I would be putting them to bed as well. It seemed really odd when they were going out to the pub or meeting friends. But I saw the whole child. And I think that planted a seed in my mind.
So, just doing a quick quantum leap here, you decided to take this project, and this is the first time you're moving to Portugal. So it just arrived last year, right? Why did you do that? And what encouraged you to do? Because you didn't really know the country that well, right?
No, I'm sorry to say I didn't know Portugal at all well. And I keep thinking, why? Why have I not been here before? I've been to the Algarve, like lots of Brits. We love the sun down on the south coast. I had been ahead, as you said in the introduction, for quite a long time. And I think subconsciously I was aware that I could possibly be stuck in a rut, that I had one more project before I get too old. And I would like to do something that reflected my thoughts on education. Education, for lots of good reasons, doesn't do change terribly well. And I think that I could see a time, and I think that the pandemic that we discussed earlier almost emphasized that we needed to change and look to the future. And I was frustrated at times that we weren't moving the whole of education, not just my school, every school forward. It was difficult to do that. So when this project was placed in front of me, and I was flattered to be asked, I sat down with my wife and I just said, this is an amazing, amazing opportunity, because it's a blank piece of paper and it's in a wonderful city in Portugal.
All right. And we're going to talk a little bit about it. So you've been here for just over 1 year. How different is life in Lisbon or in Portugal from the life you had in the UK? Because the stereotype of the Brit expat here fits more something like in lines of going to play golf in the Algarve or in Cascais or in Estoril, whatever it is. And we were talking about it, right? That connection between Britain and Portugal is quite a long one through the ages. But in many ways, Lisbon is becoming more expat friendly than it was until, 5 or 6 years ago, where most of the expats and people that were not Portuguese and having high paid jobs would rather stay in the outer rim of the city, right? And in places like Cascais and Estoril.
I think that's right. I think my personal feeling is I wish I could be playing golf more often. I would love that stereotypical.
But are you?
I love golf, and I've only played once since I've been here.
Okay.
I've been here sort of 7 or 8 months.
So you're not
now.
enjoying the perks of the country?
I will do. Don't worry. Once I sort of have everything sorted. But joking aside, I think it's a beautiful city. Interestingly, I didn't hear anybody say one bad thing about Lisbon, and I talked to a lot of people before I came in, and actually since I've been here. And I think it's partly the people. Portuguese people are incredibly welcoming, and it's a very, very dynamic city in terms of lots of people here from different countries around the world. It's a really diverse, and they're very welcoming, very warm, and it's a beautiful city, not because it's got thousands of amazing buildings, although there are lots of lovely buildings. It's just got some amazing views, and the climate obviously helps. So there's an outdoor life in a city. I mean, just to give you an example, I took my office. I now have 4 people working with me in my office, and I took
where are your offices?
So the office is 50 yards across the road from where the school will be in Alcântara,
and close to Alcântara.
And we went to the beach a couple of weeks ago, and we could be on the beach in 15 minutes. And you just think, how many other capital cities around the world could you do that? So that's a very small example, and there'll be some people who are not interested in being in the beach, but it offers an outdoor way of life that I don't think many other capital cities around the world do.
And do you have any hobby? So you're playing golf, but you're not hitting the pitch so often. What are you? Do you have time for any hobbies here?
At the moment, my family is still in the UK.
Oh, okay.
So quite a lot of my free time, I'm sort of jetting backwards and forwards, or they're coming out here. So I've got very good at taking my family and relations and friends on a sort of quick tour around Lisbon, which I'm still enjoying doing.
All right. So last year, you took this challenge of setting an international school from pretty much from scratch. The Lisbon, which is an Artemis education school. Can you tell us a little bit about the inception of the project? Because the school itself, you have another campus in Qatar, and it's a Qatari company behind the project. So how did you start this new school project?
It's actually a British company.
It is a British company.
Okay. who are currently based in Qatar, but they are moving to Lisbon when the school's open.
Oh, nice!
So all my boss's children are going to be in my school. So no pressure.
No pressure.
No pressure
at all.
They have set up. They've raised money around the world, and not just in Qatar. And they've set the goal of setting up a number of schools, a small number of schools. They're not trying to be a huge organization with schools in every continent, but a number of really high quality schools and very diverse schools that have a few common goals. They want them to be kind, happy schools. They want them to be eco friendly and run a sustainable campus. And they want them to be successful, but they have left me, apart from that, a completely blank canvas, which is fantastic, and they will leave that side of it to me. So from an educational point of view, I've got the ideal background because I've got some amazing businessmen who deal with the business, and they leave the education to me.
So they let you run the pedagogical thoughts. They let you kind of think about the actual product that you are creating. And why did you decide to do it here in Lisbon? Did you see a specific market opportunity for this kind of educational model here in the city?
The Artemis team, before they took me on, had done a huge amount of research, which of course was slightly influenced by the pandemic, or the onset of the pandemic. But I think they had identified Lisbon before the pandemic came as a potential site for a school. But one of the big deal breakers, I think, was managing to get a site that was big enough to hold a big international school in the center of Lisbon, because one of the things that many families notice is that there's very few schools in the center and lots around the outside. And I think you sort of hinted earlier that there are lots of families who are coming, perhaps don't want to live around the outside, which is a sort of...
And sometimes the choice is, where is the school, right?
Exactly. And I get that. You don't want to spend your whole time driving in a car and or putting your children in a school bus the whole time. It's nice to have it just down the road. So acquiring the site was a key moment in the history of this plan.
And the site is an old factory, right? Which has a fairly big implementation square footage. I don't know exactly how much it is, but I think it's like several thousand square meters. In a place of the city which is being also very renovated. So you have a new hospital there. You have a number of new habitational complexes being built as well. Not to speak about Alex Factory and other more avant-garde cultural scene spaces. Was this a strategic location, or was it just because the sheer opportunity of having this wonderful, very sturdy building that you could take and refurbish according to your own architectural concept?
I think the building has a lot to do with it, because there, as I said earlier, there are very, very few sites in Lisbon that could host a school of 1,200 pupils. Actually, we were told we could get 1,400 pupils.
You were told by the city council, by the permit.
But to us, that felt a little bit too much of a squeeze. So 1,200 pupils. And the building is an amazing building. You hinted it was a factory. It was an old pasta and cereal factory.
Pasta and cereal.
Yes.
Okay.
Which is just wonderful. And the science and technology block was where the flour was stored when it came off the boats from the river. And
because this is a centennial building, right? It was built maybe in the beginning of the 20th century.
So the first building was built in 1904, and the last building was built in 1912. So
it's still there. It's very much they knew how to do it back then.
Andre, if you saw the thickness of the walls, they're amazing. And it is such an inspirational sort of skin in which to build a school. And I think that's one of the things that excited me, was putting a modern school inside this beautiful old building.
And you are working with the best of the best in terms of the architectural concept. Right?
Absolutely. Federico Valsacina and his team have been intrinsically involved in the development of that corner of Lisbon. I know in other areas as well, but he had the master plan, and so for us to use him to develop the school was just a natural choice. And he's been amazing sort of source of information and support in the journey so far.
All right, so before we actually jump into the actual concept of the school, how is the construction works going?
So we've reached the stage where the inside has been now completely gutted. So if you and I walk there tomorrow, we would find just the walls and the floors. It was after the pasta factory closed. It's been used as an office block. So there was an absolute rabbit warren of tiny little offices, very, very, very close together, and all of those have been stripped out. All of the old lift shafts and old air conditioning units and all of these have been stripped out, and it is now just a shell. And we're about to begin the building, the exciting bit.
The idea is to open September, just before September 2023.
Yes.
The next. Sorry, not the next school year, but the year just after. So let's jump in a little bit into the educational concept. How is the school going to be different from other international schools here in Lisbon, or the ones that tend to be the most well known?
I've visited a couple of the schools, but it would be wrong for me to comment on the specific schools. But I think three things I hope will make the Lisbon different. The first is the location, which we talked upon. There are very, very few 3 to 18 schools actually in the center of Lisbon. The second one is
because you are covering from the very early years, all the way to the end of the cycle.
Yeah.
And this is because you have the sheer capacity to do so as well, right? In terms of students.
And that's right. The buildings, perhaps I should have said earlier, the buildings are enormous inside. Right, they are cavernous inside, and we can keep the 3-year-olds away from the 17-year-olds right. if you want to. It's not as though you're going to be bumping into each other in the corridors the whole time. And you know,
it's almost a campus.
It is a campus. That's ways. A very good description. It is more of a campus than a school. And that's lovely because it means that, joking aside, the little ones can have their own space to grow in. And as you work your way up through the school, there are 5 floors in the classroom block, 6 floors on the science and technology. They're all very separate.
But one of the differentiation factors that, at least reading your website and through her conversations, you told me about your focus on STEAM topics as well, and providing kids with the conditions to work on science projects and so on and so forth. Do you want to cover that as well?
Yeah. I think one of the things that would differentiate us, if I can just finish that before
Absolutely.
we move on to that, is I really am ambitious for the children, and ambition is something that sadly appears to be lacking in education, which frustrates me because I want the best for the children. Now, the best doesn't necessarily mean that it has to be 10 GCSE exams or the highest ever marks at the IB exam. It means that actually what the children need is as many opportunities and encouragement. Not every child naturally finds maths easy, or football, or acting. And so we want to encourage all the children to have as many opportunities. But just to go back to your point, one of my key drivers in this new project has been discovery and encouraging children not just to sit in the classroom and listen to a teacher standing at the front of the class telling children. I want the children to be involved in the act of discovery, and that feeling and seeing children from the very youngest age all the way up to 18 actually discovering information. That's one of the things,
to have more agency to what they're doing.
Yeah,
I've seen that you are following one of the a specific author, Matthew Seed, from the UK, and part of his message is about high performance, right? How performance and the how people view there are 2 schools of philosophical thought, if you will, about how high performers achieve. One of them is, they have talent, so they're gifted and just God chosen to be like that. Another one is really coaching them to be the high performers, and it gives the example of how Britain moved from being one of not performing good in cyclism, and now having some of the best cyclism teams in the world, really, and it's not because genetics of the British people change overnight, right? But mostly because the training method and the training approach of very influential coaches actually allowed that to happen. So do you believe in this school of thought?
Where I find Matthew Syed fascinating, and particularly in that first book that he wrote, Bounce, was he struggled, or he brought to light the struggle between natural talent and practice, and how much you can achieve by one or the other. And it got me thinking, what are we doing in education? Are we just getting the children to practice lots, or are we making the most of their natural talents? Because every child has got a talent in something, and I'm a strong believer in that. And it is our job to uncover that. And yet, when I stand up sometimes at the end of term to present prizes, there are some children who you look and think, have we really developed your talents as much as we could have done? And that saddens me. That really saddens me. So here is an opportunity to start a school from scratch, which we're not just talking about awarding prizes to everybody. That's not what I'm talking about. It's trying to uncover and inspire children in whatever area it might be. And so it was Matthew Syed's initial book that I read, 7 or 8 years ago, that sort of sowed a seed in my mind. Come on, let's try and find a happy balance, because to me, education was more about the practice rather than nurturing the natural talent. I also was fascinated. I don't know if you've seen his latest book, Rebel Ideas, which also developed for me something that sort of made a lot of sense, which was that we've also got to challenge children to think outside the box. Mm-hmm. And I think for your listeners to this podcast, one of the greatest challenges is, how do we make education relevant for the future? How do we prepare children to go and be the entrepreneurs, the leaders, the workers of the future? Because I'm pretty sure that the education we're doing at the moment is not doing that as effectively as it could.
And you have the transient to do that as a headmaster, because I don't know how it works for the oversight, but in most schools in Portugal, especially if you are working under the Portuguese curriculum, what you're allowed to do is very, is within boundaries, right? And you have those boundaries, and it's a very, some people call it a Stalinistic approach, where someone in the ministry decides what to do, and then there is a chain of command, and schools are supposed to do what they're supposed to do. But I guess in your case, you have that transient to choose and to actually craft the curriculum according to your own school board initiatives.
So I've spoken to probably 20 or so educational leaders from around the world in international schools in different countries, and leaders back in the UK who I knew from my own experience. And I said to them all, I've got a blank piece of paper here. What would you do? Mm-hmm. And it was fascinating to hear the huge range of opportunities, from literally a couple saying, well, what we've got at the moment is the best, all the way to scrap all exams and let's start afresh. Mm-hmm. And of course, I could then put down my own ideas, and I knew that the blank piece of paper, whatever I put on there, you're going to have to pass children through certain hoops. It's not fair for me just to educate children, or expect parents to educate children without them, for example, taking GCSEs or an exam at 18, which gets them into the best universities in the world. Mm-hmm. Even though I'm not a great believer in the exam system that we have at the moment, I think it could be better. We have to help the children, because they've got to stand toe to toe with children from other schools around the world, not just in Portugal. So my ideal school would not necessarily have those things in it, but we've got to compromise. And I think to answer your question, it's the framework and the ethos that you build around that's important.
And did you have you were speaking about this consultants? Who were these educational experts that you have consulted with?
So I've spoken to a number. I hope they would call themselves leaders, particularly about the academics. It was I'm pretty clear what I knew that I wanted in terms of ethos, but I spoke to the director of studies or academic deputies in leading schools in the UK and around the world. And as I say, there was a myriad of different answers.
Yeah, we have people like I believe Stephen Wolfram, that also from the UK, that it has been very vocal for the last 10 years or so on computational thinking, and has been very influential because his premise is that teaching manual computation doesn't make sense nowadays, because we have that thing called computers, right? So what we should be teaching kids is how to think about algorithms, how to think in computational thinking, how to program and stuff like that. And it's just someone that I've been following for some years.
And just on that front, Andre, you may have seen it on YouTube. I think Ken Robinson, sadly no longer with us, he's some of the most watched.
I think he has like the record, the YouTube most watched TED
Talk. Yeah. And his push was, we must allow more creativity, which I have some sympathy with. I have to say, I think in 2022, creativity with some of the things that you were talking about, the not just using technology, but teaching children how to use technology as well.
And creativity is definitely one of the cornerstones here of this new school project in Alcântara, the Lisboan School. Reading through your website, you have a very interesting section, which, if you allow me, I would just read, which has... reading from your webpage, you focus on the connection between the school and the community by, and I'm quoting, repurposing and upcycling a landmark heritage property, and then that we have talked about, but also delivery of carbon positive renovations through sustainable offsets. Can you elaborate on this one? And we'll just go through this because I think I understand what you're saying. But if you want to tell us about the specifics, are you actually offsetting the carbon emissions of the actual renovations? Is that what you're doing?
The whole lot, everything. Artemis were very clear that when we set off on this journey, I always get worried when people read from the website. I didn't know which bit you were going. and
I just read from actually the bottom section, but that was the one that I found specifically most interesting for our conversation.
It's very relevant. So just to give you an example, during the internal demolition that we've been going through, we've cleared out a huge amount of metalwork, which I guess 5-10 years ago would have just gone and sat on a scrap heap somewhere. And we have spent a lot of money. I won't lie, it's not been the cheapest way of doing this, but in ensuring that has gone away to be recycled and reused somewhere,
or upcycled as well, right?
Upcycle, yeah, exactly. I think that one of the key things is lots of people say, well, a little bit of metal is not going to make much difference, but every material that we are now using that will come in really from this week onwards to help build the school has been sourced. The transport to and from the school has been calculated, included in the calculation for the carbon footprint. And Artemis, before the school opens, will offset all of that.
All right. Offsetting, I think it's easy to understand, but the next one is delivery of carbon positive school operations and ongoing business, which I think is a little bit more challenging, right?
Yes. Well, the two are linked actually, because one of the or a couple of the projects that Artemis are using is to support a community in rural Peru and in rural Kenya. And that means not just giving them new trees to plant, but it also is helping the farmers in their education. And that sounds patronizing, and I've probably phrased it very badly, but it's helping the future that they can grow sustainable in a sustainable manner. And so we are trying to look to the future the whole time. When the school is open, we want to have zero. We want to be on zero, so that
so you want to be a net zero school
as we open. And I think that's an important message for the children. And when we open, we are going to try to stay at zero. It's going to be hard because obviously a school by its very nature.
One of the schemes that you are going to implement is a reward scheme for low impact lifestyles. Example, no cars on school runs. I guess, are you going to promote kids biking to school, parents biking to school? Is that what you're doing here?
One of them, but you're not going to get a 3-year-old to be able to cycle to school.
So actually, my 3-year-old does cycle, but not to school.
But yes, absolutely. So we are considering, and that the reason it's slightly vague on the website at the moment is this is still in discussion. And
what kind of discussions are you having around this?
For example, we may be able to offer free after-school activities or free uniform or something to parents who are using.
Actually, let me just tell you, Martin, one of the speakers that we have in line for not the next podcast, but the one just after, is the CTO, the ex-CTO of the city of Vilnius, and we had our first guest of the show for the series, Julius Petronis. He told us, Andre, when I was speaking with her, she told me the best way to reduce mobility has nothing to do with mobility. The best way to reduce mobility is to provide good schools, because if parents have good schools close to their homes, they don't have to drive to schools that are, outside their, or they just don't have to drive at all because they can actually walk kids to school. So, and he told me, for me, that was such a novel way to look at the problem. But I guess that might also pose a challenge, right? Because you might have lots of parents driving to school. How to tackle these challenges, right?
Well, I think we're off to a very good start in the location that we are, because it has a fantastic network of public transport.
It does, and it might have even better in the future with the subway and moving there and so on.
I'm keeping everything crossed on that front. I think they've started the next stations down, so it's getting closer. But that would be amazing, because it literally would open up pretty much all of Lisbon to Alcântara. But there is already, with the trams, the buses, the 2 train stations in Alcântara. You've got a pretty good network to get there. We are also going to have a couple of bus routes using electric minibuses to help parents.
The school bus is going to be an electrical school bus.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, that's great. I would expect this at this moment, but that's something.
And of course, if you can put 16 children in a minibus and transport them to school, then that's 16 cars that you haven't got on the road.
Yeah,
so it makes a lot of sense.
And schools do have a social responsibility towards that, which is something I always found in many ways fascinating, which is, what happens from the road of the school outside. It's not the school's it's out of the school's agenda, out of the school's reach, and it shouldn't be that way, right? I mean, it has such a important communal impact that some of the things need to be designed, right? Design and engineer from day one, because it just creates the ethos that you were talking about. Speaking about ethos and maybe pathos, what has been the connection with the city council? Because this is a huge impact. This is over 1,000 students in a area of Lisbon, and that until recently had very little educational offer at all. It's actually changing the landscape. How has been the
all positive so far? I think one of the interesting points to make here is the positive impact the school can have on the local community. I think those days where you used to have a school, particularly perhaps an international school with a high fence around it, and nobody really knew what happened inside that school, I hope those days are gone. I think the school, we Artemis,
will it have a fence, or is it
for safety?
For safety,
but actually, what we want is the school to be a hub for the community. We want it to be, because it literally is in the heart of Alcântara. We would like it to be the heart of the community, and we see that happening in a number of ways. We want to make the facilities available to the local community during the evenings when the children have gone home. So 6:30 onwards, it can make its sports centre, the theatre, music rooms available to the local community. We are planning, a year after the school opens, we are planning a cafe, so that can become a nice. I mean, there's already lots of good cafes and bars around, so it's not that the community needs that, but that can act.
There's always space for a better cafe. Ask me.
Yeah, absolutely. That I can see that as being another sort of hub for the community, and two other ways that I've sort of wanted to introduce is Artemis are very kindly setting up a number of bursaries, so that we feel it's important that local children have the opportunity to come to the school, not just the international community. And
that poses also a pricing challenge, right?
Yes, that it does.
Are you going to have any kind of stipends or or scholarships for locals?
That is the entire purpose. You're absolutely right, of the bursaries. The bursaries are for people who wouldn't otherwise be able to attend an international school like ours, and we are going to keep that going, maintain the momentum by establishing a foundation to which anybody in Lisbon can contribute, which will make life-changing opportunities for children.
What about connection with other schools? Like local schools or even Portuguese-speaking schools? Portugal.
Funnily enough, I've already made contact with a local school who have a couple of beautiful grass pitches, because we haven't got any grass outside facilities. So I've offered to have closer connections. They don't have a theatre. We're going to have a theatre, so perhaps there's a chance to use it. I think the days where every school has to have every single facility itself perhaps have gone, and I'm coming from the defense background. Even in defense nowadays, we're speaking about smart defense, which is you have the tanks, I have the boats. So why should I have tanks and boats and everything in between? And if we are allies, we can that's actually what's happening right now. We also are lucky enough to have the marina.
You do have the marina.
A short hop, skip, or a jump away, and so we can some of our activities,
sailing classes there.
We can sail and paddleboard and canoe and kayak. There's 101 different things that we can do.
So you spoke about the bursaries. What about kindergarten model? Is it going to be Montessori? Which one are you adopting?
No, throughout the school, you've probably gathered by now that we're going to be using a hybrid of. So it's a fresh approach rather than sort of hugely alternative. It's a sort of fresh approach. There are elements of Montessori that I admire hugely, and I hope that they would recognize in our provision. But actually, I'm not sure if you're aware of the Early Years Foundation in Great Britain, the EYFS, funnily enough, is probably the most relevant and forward-looking part of the UK. Gosh, I'll get shot down by lots of people here, but perhaps the most relevant and forward-looking part of our education system, in terms of encouraging children to learn independently and forward-looking.
So for people that are not so familiar with the early learning framework, is it somehow related to Montessori? What's the differences there?
I think it's possibly a touch more structured than the Montessori is, but it is based on 7 pillars of learning, and everything the children do is loosely based around those 7 pillars that sets them up beautifully to lead into the more structured sort of literature, numeracy, science, etc., that we would recognize.
So that's also a way to understand natural talents and natural inclinations.
Absolutely. And funnily enough, I attended a meeting just before the pandemic with lots of other heads from junior schools, kindergartens, universities, and as the day went on, it became increasingly clear that what we do at the very beginning of the education is pretty good, and what sort of industry wants, and then sadly we sort of wander away from that.
So at Lisboan School, also from previous conversation, we understand that you have the kids will have the choice of after school activities, including Mandarin to jewelry making, sports on the weekends. Kids are not necessarily always eager to participate on some of these activities. So what kind of strategies are you expecting to push them towards some of these activities? Is that trying lots of things? Because there's also this philosophy, you might have read the book Range, where the author defends that people should have this approach of trying and having this more eclectic view of the world, and then as they are more inclined towards something or another, they will kind of dive deeper. But over specialization at the early age is too precocious and will not allow you to really understand and grasp what is there about the world.
So at some stage in a child's career, I always say to them, try everything. Because what you don't want to do is get to the age of 18, 19, 20 and then think, oh, I really wish I'd tried playing the violin or playing basketball or whatever it might be. Have a go at it. You might find that you really enjoy it. So I think what you're alluding to is how much can we put into our curriculum that the children have to do and how much is optional. And I think one of the things that a blank sheet of paper gives you is an opportunity to try and rethink the school day in order to ensure that you have enough learning time, the old-fashioned learning time in the classroom, but also that you have enough time built in. And I'm certainly just doing this now of team games, of trying music, of drama, all those things that children really should be doing outside the classroom as well. Because one of the things that I think I mentioned earlier, coming up in a boarding background, you can see that a child playing a trumpet on a stage and getting a big round of applause or scoring a goal in football gives them enormous confidence. When they're struggling with some maths or science, this gives them a boost that they need. And all children struggle at some stage, but all children, as I said at the very beginning, are good at something. And it's our job to inspire them to try and uncover whatever it is that they're good at. So I think the more opportunities we can provide at the school and in sites around Lisbon, then the better. And that's one of the things that excites me about Lisbon is there are so many opportunities that doors that we can open for children. And I've just been in contact, for example, with a lady who contacted me, who owns a sort of fashion house. She designs and makes clothing. And I was thinking, well, that's not really anything to do with school. And then I thought, no, actually, that might be something that really lights the fire of a child. So, she's going to come in once a week and she's going to talk to the children and help them design and make clothes. And that just sort of, came completely out of the blue.
Martin, what drives you in the morning? What do you enjoy the most about your work? This precise moment, designing it is quite exciting, but I'm really missing the buzz that is a school, and I think that creating that buzz is what drives me, and seeing children thriving in a school. So to answer your question, I hope it doesn't sound too corny, but to find what makes a child tick, to find what they're really good at, and then to pass them on into the world aged 18, ready to take on university or jobs or whatever it might be that they go on to do, and do it really well, set them up for life. It's a real privilege for us to be able to do that. Absolutely. But like any other human, you must also have your own frustration. So if you had a superpower to change the educational model of today at this K-12 school, what is the first thing you would immediately tackle about it?
Without hesitation, I can say it's this obsession with testing and examining pupils, because I don't think the tests or exams that are currently in operation really help the children onto the next stage. And you can see little examples of that by the fact that a lot of universities are now introducing their own entrance exams, because they're finding that the traditional exams do not prepare them properly or test them properly. And I don't think we're helping the children. So I think if I could look, I want children to get as many A grades at GCSE as they possibly can, but I think just preparing, just learning to pass exams is the wrong way forward. So I'm hoping that Lisbon children will get as many A grades and A stars at GCSEs as anybody else. But I hope that we'll get to it by inspiring the pupils rather than just making them sit down and spend hours learning.
All right. So regarding this school initiative, you said that you guys are, at least the group behind the Lisboan School, wants to expand. What are your expansion plans? Are you still expansion? Do you have any other expansion plans for Portugal at this moment that you can talk about?
No. Nothing in concrete. But there's definitely a sort of idea that's floating around that Portugal is a country that's on the move in a positive way. And I know that they wouldn't mind me saying that outside the traditional centres of the Algarve and Lisbon and Porto, there are probably some development potential to work with the Portuguese and hopefully expand.
Yes, and are you expecting to have some kind of I don't think the word is probably the most correct one. School tourism, like it is an established industry in the United Kingdom, in Switzerland, where you have foreign students, even at this younger ages, coming to study here in Portugal, because that has not been, historically speaking, very explored here. Is there something you also want to provide for foreign students that want to stay in the country? Or
no, I think we feel currently that there are enough. In fact,
local parents,
local and international. Here in Lisbon. Lisbon's I think we mentioned at the beginning, it's such a diverse and eclectic city already that one doesn't need to do that. It might be that in the future, but I don't think so.
But do you have in mind any specific, and I'm not speaking about the parents now, I'm speaking of persona in terms of the student, who is the ideal Lisboan school student in your mind?
Any child who just wants to give it a go. Just come and give the life at the Lisbon a go, because it'll be an incredibly exciting journey, and there'll be some who are nervous about that, and there'll be some who embrace it straight away. But we'll welcome everybody, because we will find. I'm determined to find what every child is good at.
Very well. That spirit of finding the best in each one of us. What kind of would you recommend any specific book or podcast or even TED talk to people listening to this show, if they want to dig deeper into some of these subjects?
Yes. Well, look, the Ken Robinson, if you haven't already seen them, as we said, they've been seen by quite a few people. Yeah, nice. I think he's fascinating, and he speaks incredibly well on the creativity side. As I said, I would love to marry what Ken Robinson says with a little bit more science. I think that the two can actually work hand in hand, and there's probably historically they haven't always, creativity and science haven't always gone hand in hand. I think they can. I'm trying to think of other podcasts. I spend my whole time listening to podcasts.
So let me ask you maybe something a little bit different, which is about the difficulty that school boards, even here in Portugal, I was watching the statistics of the Ministry of Education here in Portugal of the age of teachers, and one of the big problems we have in the Portuguese educational system right now is that the average age of the median age of the teacher is over 50 years old. So as these people retire, they will have lots of difficulty finding younger teachers and younger talents to go into the education. Is this also a problem for international schools to get younger talents to go into education and be a professor, be a teacher?
I'm just in the process of recruiting.
You
now.
are, and that's why I'm asking.
It's a very timely question. I've been really lucky to have an amazing response to some of the advertisements. So
it is easy to pitch them to come to live in Lisbon as well.
Yes, or? I think it is a combination. Again, I think people are quite excited about the project, but I also think. And look, I'm not saying you could probably earn a lot more money in the Middle East or the Far East if you were genuinely footloose. But as I said at the beginning, I've never heard anybody say a bad word about Lisbon, and that's not just me. That's reflected.
So that also helps to sell the project.
It definitely helps. I think you've touched on we could probably have a whole podcast on recruitment in teaching worldwide. I think it is something that I feel we as leaders in education need to encourage more and make it easy for
because
graduates to come.
Most kids, they don't want to be teachers nowadays, right? I mean, when I was a kid, that was something that crossed our minds. But nowadays, people want to do something else, and even in terms of the the pay of the profession vis-a-vis other professional careers, it might have some competitive factors there. But anyways, and if you wanted to speak about it, by all means, let me know. But let me just ask you, what words of advice would you give your younger self, Martin, who had just graduated from high school, that was ready to take that RAF test, or and I guess there was a test back then, or at least they had to measure your height. What would you say him?
I think that was a setback for me. In hindsight, I didn't probably recognize it at the time, but it was a knock. And I think that what I would say to any child is, firstly, make the most of all opportunities whenever they come along in your life, both at school and beyond. Don't waste any chances, because actually they might not come again. And I think for my younger self, I should have stepped back, taken a little bit of a look around, rather than just jumping straight into university, because that was the next thing to do. I would have still gone to university, by the way, but maybe studied something different.
So what kind of opportunities are you going to give your students out of year 13, instead of just going and doing their I believe it's the A exam. What's the
we're not doing A levels, but we're following the International Baccalaureate, which is
there is an equivalent to that.
It's the same. It's just a little bit more internationally based and outward looking, but it'll still get you into the best universities in UK and Europe.
I guess the question is still the same. What kind of advice network do you have in place to let them evaluate university just out of school, vis-a-vis other options like internships, or Air Force, or military service, or civic service, voluntary, whatever they might want to do? Do you have anything in place sought specifically for these 17-year-olds, 18-year-olds?
I think the process can start at 16. I think,
or even younger.
Yeah. I think one of the parts of the Lisbon will be a program of encouraging. Perhaps it'll be partly parents, but also Lisbon is full of fantastic outward-looking people, entrepreneurs who are doing jobs that we wouldn't have even thought about 5 years ago. And getting those guys to come in and chat to the children, even if it's just for half an hour, just to inspire them to look outside the traditional. Because if you and I went into many schools, particularly in the UK now, people would be talking about the same careers, and yet the chances are probably very high that they won't be doing those careers at all. You can imagine the bankers and the legal system and etc. That's where they aspire to go to. But actually, there's such an exciting world out there of opportunity. So that's what I mean when I say take those opportunities. So I hope that we can help nurture and encourage the children to follow different paths. To look outwards rather than just looking down an old-fashioned traditional pathway. We'll call it careers. We may need a more adventurous title than that, but it will be helping them choose the right university, maybe going straight into an apprenticeship, whatever it might be appropriate for that child.
Very well. Thank you, Martin. Thank you so much for being with us. Also, thank you for listening to the podcast. If you enjoyed, please give us your review on Spotify podcast. Share this episode with friends and colleagues. We also have some show notes on our blog at productized.medium.com, where you can join the community. We will be sharing the links that we have spoken during the podcast. The podcast was hosted by me, André Marquet. It was researched by Evelina Bogdan and sound editing by Miguel Souza. Thank you.